You may not realize this, but the origin of the term atom remains elusive. Historically, the word atom traces back to ancient Greece, where a group of thinkers theorized that if you continued to break matter into smaller and smaller components, you would eventually discover something indivisible, the fundamental building block of reality. They called this the atom. If you've had a standard high school education, you likely recognize that the atom described in modern science is not the indivisible entity the ancient Greeks envisioned. The classical model of the atom, once seen as the bedrock of reality, has been replaced. We've since broken it down into subatomic particles. Ironically, the term subatomic contradicts the original meaning of atom, which literally translates to indivisible or uncuttable, what we now call elementary particles or fundamental particles are, in a sense, closer to the original concept of the atom. Curiously, the atom has undergone a transformation. It is no longer singular but plural, evolving into atoms. This shift highlights an odd and intriguing journey of the concept. The atom, much like the philosopher's stone in alchemy, seems to symbolize a deeper human quest, a search for unity, wholeness, and the essence of existence. It reflects a deep-seated longing within the human psyche to reconcile opposites, to uncover a seamless reality without division. Throughout history, humanity has been haunted by this idea. It's as though we sense the existence of this ultimate reality but can never fully grasp it. You might argue that we've already discovered fundamental particles. But here's the paradox. Much like how the atom was once considered the smallest unit, these so-called elementary particles now seem to be composed of something even more fundamental. This brings us to the concept of information, a word that's become central in contemporary discourse. The fabric of reality itself seems to be intricately tied to information. But what is information, really? Physics explores how things interact. Yet what I'm asking is, what makes something a thing in the first place? What exactly is information? Though the term might seem straightforward, no one has definitively answered this question. And here's where things get even stranger. Information and consciousness appear to have a mysterious, almost indistinguishable relationship. Is reality fundamentally made of information, or is it consciousness? Or could they be one and the same? In classical Greek philosophy, the term nous refers to the capacity to discern reality. Upon closer examination, nous itself seems fundamental. To explore this, we must start with a simple yet profound question. What is information? When people hear information, they often think of the digital, zeros, ones, and bits. But equating information with the digital is like equating all beverages with soda. Digital information is merely one expression of a much older and more profound concept. To better grasp what I mean, consider synonyms like connections, relationships, or patterns. I prefer patterns because it steps away from the sterile language of computer science and evokes something more universal. But what does it mean for something to be in a pattern? A pattern can be thought of as something that consistently repeats. When something enters this loop of repetition, it becomes fixed, unchanging, and, in a sense, eternal. It forms what might be described as a singularity, a self-referential cycle folding in on itself. To us, these repeating patterns appear as things, units of reality. This is the essence of information. It's the patterns and relationships that give rise to the perception of things. Consider the laws of physics. For example, the conservation of momentum states that an object at rest stays at rest, while an object in motion stays in motion. These two conditions, rest, and motion are fundamentally the same. Without interaction or acceleration, an object in a vacuum would appear frozen in time, trapped in a self-referential loop. This unchanging momentum is a perfect example of a pattern, a continuous, self-sustaining state that defines reality. Our consciousness perceives reality through these patterns. They are so fundamental that we've enshrined them as the laws of nature. When patterns break down into chaos, they become unobservable and thus cease to exist in our conscious experience. Observation itself is the linchpin here. Whether in science or philosophy, the act of observing is inseparable from the reality we seek to understand. Yet, observation raises its own questions. Where is information? Is it within the observer or external to them? These questions echo ancient philosophical paradoxes, such as whether mathematics is invented or discovered, or whether a tree falling in a forest makes a sound if no one is there to hear it. These paradoxes reveal the blurry line between the observer and the observed, pointing to truths that we may have forgotten in modern times. The process of observation and its relationship with information remains an enigma. Science often sidesteps this issue by focusing on objective consensus through processes like peer review. But even then, subjectivity is inescapable. Institutions rely on collective agreement to validate discoveries. Yet this consensus is always based on interpretation, not absolute truth. In the end, information and observation are intertwined in ways we don't fully understand. They seem to form the very foundation of reality. This raises profound questions. Where is information? Does it exist independently or only within the mind of the observer? These questions might feel like chasing paradoxes, but paradoxes often point us toward deeper truths. They are a reminder that reality is far more intricate than we often assume. To illustrate my point, let's engage in a thought experiment. Imagine writing a math equation on a piece of paper, sealing it in a plastic bottle, and tossing it into the ocean. While the bottle floats, is the math equation still present on the paper? If you claim it's just a plastic bottle adrift and doesn't become a math equation until someone finds it, you're suggesting that information is tied to memory, that patterns depend on conscious recognition. For a pattern to exist, it requires reinforcement through awareness. As I've mentioned before, patterns are defined by their repetition. This consistency is tied to memory, the essence of in repetition. In essence, recognizing a pattern requires someone to acknowledge, "I've seen this before." Consider if I handed you a paper with unfamiliar symbols. Are they meaningless or part of a language you don't know? It all depends on your prior knowledge, your memory. I discussed this in a previous video. When we identify something as patterned, it's instantly stored as memory, which we call knowledge. But this leads us to an intriguing paradox, known as the paradox of inquiry, or Zeno's paradox. It states that we can only understand what we already know. For instance, Julius Caesar couldn't ask about the iPhone 12's battery life because such a concept wasn't in his memory. Knowledge, therefore, is built upon pre-existing patterns. But if learning requires patterns to evolve, how can we ever acquire new knowledge? By definition, learning demands a transformation of existing structures within our memory. Yet knowledge seems inherently static, confined within a closed framework. New information challenges this logic. It suggests patterns can change. Returning to our floating math equation, if you believe it remains a math equation regardless of observation, then you argue that information exists independently of consciousness. Reality, in this view, is inherently patterned, whether or not we perceive it. However, this leads to another paradox. If reality is entirely patterned and deterministic, how does anything genuinely new occur? Chaos, often dismissed as unmeasured complexity, becomes the key here. To claim that all chaos is hidden order is to support a deterministic universe where nothing truly novel exists. In such a world, happening is meaningless, as everything is preordained. Yet paradoxically, we perceive events, changes, and disruptions. This implies that beyond the apparent order lies another dimension, one that facilitates change. Dimensions, by their nature, reveal openings in what seems closed. Our experience of reality, shaped by time and perception, intersects with this dimension, introducing the chaos we call change. Plato aptly described time as the moving image of eternity. This shift from timelessness into temporal experience parallels the biblical narrative of humanity's fall from Eden, a metaphor for the descent from eternal unity into time-bound existence. This separation also birthed individuality, a perspective rooted in ignorance, not as stupidity, but in the literal sense of not knowing. It is the illusion of privacy, of being separate from the whole. The Christian myth of Adam and Eve reflects this. Their first act after gaining knowledge was to cover themselves, to conceal. Yet the divine could still see them fully. Similarly, chaos stems from perceiving oneself as distinct from the whole, as existing apart from eternity. Philosophically, this eternal, unchanging essence, whether called form, light, or spirit, descended into matter, becoming bound by time. Time, then, is matter, experiencing itself. Our bodies are time machines, ticking away as we move through this temporal plane. All life adheres to this cycle. It arises, decays, and eventually fades. While some see this as punishment or a prison, I argue the opposite. Life is an opportunity, a purposeful process, not a trap. If reality is already patterned, then learning and events are interconnected. They are not separate, but facets of the same phenomenon. This suggests we are meant to uncover something, a realization akin to a punchline or a profound irony. The journey of life may be leading us back to the very thing we've been avoiding, an eternal truth revealed through this temporal experience. Consciousness itself seems to be turning inside out, evolving through a dynamic confrontation with the unknown. Life is a force, striving for permanence, seeking to transcend death. The irony, however, is that in attempting to escape eternity, we are ultimately rediscovering it. Today is my birthday. At least it was when I recorded this. Reflecting on this past year of exploring metaphysical ideas, I've realized that life is a gift, a currency meant to be spent wisely. Energy, the essence of life, is treated by all living things as invaluable. Yet humans, unique in our capacity for intellect and creativity, often misuse this gift. There's a reason for our abilities, a purpose behind our consciousness. Whether you call it evolution, divine design, or something else, it's part of a larger unfolding process. This process is irreversible, and our role is to align with it, to assist in its realization. Life is a preparation, a grand alchemical wedding between chaos and order, time and eternity. The only real question is, what should I be doing? Despite modern skepticism about philosophy and metaphysics, these questions are vital. As Scripture reminds us, man does not live by bread alone. Life is more than survival. It is a quest for meaning. To answer this question, you must embrace your own unique journey. Examine your fears, strengths, and desires. Growth requires stepping into the unknown, facing challenges, and evolving. I am on this path too, and I will continue to grow. just as I encourage you to do. Let this new year be a time of reflection and progress. Thank you for your support, and until next time, stay blessed.